Welcome back, everyone. Believe it or not, I have pretty much every single Max version of the iPhones Apple has ever made, from the iPhone XS Max all the way up to the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And I've already done separate comparisons between all these iPhones, but I kind of want to look at them all side by side and kind of go through the history of each of these. I will try to do a speed test that probably won't happen, but it's still very interesting to see how they all kind of look alike. Now, I do have the skin on the back of my XS Max, but ever since the 11 Pro Max, they've kind of evened out and they looked pretty much like the exact same phone on the back. Now, in terms of the front, there's also been a little bit of some improvements. So from the XS Max, you can see this iPhone, it had that 6.5-inch display. It was very beautiful. And you can even kind of see going from the XS Max, the 11 Pro Max, the 12 Pro Max, and the 13 Pro Max, that there's been some improvements here and there, but it's not been anything super crazy. Definitely if you look at, like the XS Max all the way to the 13 Pro Max, you can see there definitely are some improvements, but a lot of the improvements are behind the displays. One of the biggest things we've seen coming from the XS Max to the, to our 13 Pro Max is the screen size. You can kind of see it from the XS Max to the 11 Pro Max that they're kind of the same size, and then with the 11 Pro Max to the 12 Pro Max that it's a little bit of an increase in size. These two, I think, are the biggest differentiating factors between any iPhone of the Max series. So more so than even the XS Max to the 11 Pro Max, even though I love the 11 Pro Max, this is probably the bigger difference, but I also think this is the bigger difference. This is the least biggest difference in my opinion. To be completely honest, I think the 13 Pro Max is way better of a phone than the 12 Pro Max, but the 11 Pro Max was such a solid phone. Also, if you look at the notches, the XS Max all the way over here actually has a bigger notch than the 11 Pro Max all the way over here. So you can even see from these two as well. So we're seeing kind of some differences in terms of everything on the outside, and also in terms of the thinness and thickness. The XS Max all the way at the front is honestly, the thinnest one, I think, out of all these. The 11 Pro Max is, I think, slightly thicker, it kind of seems like. And then with the 12 Pro Max, it was a pretty different phone. It was pretty much different flat size, smaller battery, which didn't make any sense in the 11 Pro Max. And you can see with the 13 Pro Max, they went ahead and increased the size of that battery, which was beautiful. And that pretty much takes us back all the way to the back of these phones. Now, with something like the XS Max and the 13 Pro Max, there's a pretty big difference here. So with the outsides, you can definitely see that there's some differences for sure. You have glass backs on both, but the iPhone 13 Pro Max did have a frosted glass back, which was beautiful. It looked great, it felt great, it still feels good, and I am a huge fan of this. Now with the dual camera setup on the back of the XS Max, it definitely looks beautiful, but the 13 Pro Max's triple camera setup looks far better. On the back or on the side, curved sides here versus the flat sides of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. And obviously at the front, this is another massive difference. We now have that Pro Motion display as well. So in the XS Max, we had that 6.5-inch panel, which was the biggest panel Apple ever made at the time. And with the 13 Pro Max, bigger display, flat sides, smaller notch, this was a pretty big difference from the XS Max. It wasn't a big difference from the 12 Pro Max, but between these two, it was a fairly large difference. And when you look at them, the displays do look pretty similar, more so than not, but the 13 Pro Max really has one of the best panels out there. Now with the 11 Pro Max, I think this is still one of my most favorite iPhones out there. This one looks so good still, and I'm a huge fan of this specific iPhone as well. And you can see in the front, still more similar than not to the XS Max. In terms of the sides, again, I really don't think it's a crazy big difference between these two. Again, you have a curved side here, you have a flat side on the 13 Pro Max, but when it comes down to it, both of them still feel and look pretty good. But it's not until we get to the back where both these iPhones look almost identical. Now you are getting a much better camera setup on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, but you're getting the same modules on both iPhones. So you're getting the same telephoto lenses, the same wide angle lenses, and the same ultra wide sensors on both iPhones. So again, this is a pretty big difference. Now you do have a LiDAR sensor on the 13 Pro Max. It's really not a crazy big deal anymore, but it is pretty cool. And power buttons on the side, and you can see between these two they are more similar than not. Now with the 12 Pro Max, without a doubt, this is one of the smaller differences I would say in terms of visual differences, but it's one of the biggest differences for the panels. So on the back, frosted glass backs on both, wireless charging, MagSafe, all that good stuff, triple camera setups, which still look pretty much the same to be honest, power buttons on the side, volume up, ringer switch, all that good stuff. But it's not until we actually boot up the displays do we actually see a bigger difference. And like I mentioned, with that ProMotion display, that is something that the iPhone 13 Pro Max has that no other iPhone can get. A lot of things are subjective, camera quality, performance. Performance is subjective to some extent. Sometimes you can click on an app before the other one, all that good stuff. With this case, with the ProMotion display, there is no coming around to it. It is a 120 hertz panel, and it looks so much better than a 60 hertz panel that all the other iPhones have, besides the iPhone 13 Pro. So I am a huge fan of the 13 Pro Max. I think it's great visually. I think it has a lot of capability. And I do think if you're somebody who wants to go and buy an iPhone, the 13 Pro Max is a better way to go. But if you really don't care about the ProMotion display, I think the iPhone 12 Pro Max is still extremely good as well. Now, I was going to try to do a speed comparison right now. I really don't think it's going to work out that well at all. So I'll go ahead and close out of all these applications and we'll see how it goes. Like I mentioned, I don't really think it's going to work out too well, but we'll go and see how it goes. Okay, all the apps are cleared out for the most part. So let's go and kind of get into it, I guess. So let's do phone calls. 3, 2, 1, and this is not going to work out. So we'll just kind of let this one slide. We'll just say for the fact that the 13 Pro Max all the way to the right is the faster phone. So when it comes down to it, I'll kind of go by one. If you have a XS Max, should you go and upgrade to a 13 Pro Max? I will say absolutely. The XS Max, in my opinion, was a great iPhone. It had a lot of capability at that time, and I still think it's a very good device for sure. My only complaint of the XS Max is the battery life. I'm not a huge fan of the battery life at all on the XS Max. I think it's one of the most weirder iPhones. It was over $1,000 phone, but it had one of the weirder battery lives that the 10R beat it in so many ways. So I'm not a fan of the XS Max's battery life, but a lot of other things about this iPhone I am a huge fan of. Now with the 11 Pro Max, I am completely indebted to this phone. This is a perfect phone in so many different ways. It has so much capability. It's a beautiful device. Maybe it doesn't have as much performance, and maybe the cameras aren't crazy good at like the 13 Pro Maxes, but this is still a very good phone. The battery life is still very good on this phone if you're on iOS 14. iOS 15 is a little bit of a different story. It still has tremendous cameras. It still has tremendous, performance. And I think for sure, if you're somebody who just wants to buy a phone and then kind of move on with their life, I think the 11 Pro Max is a very good option. Again, it's not perfect, but it definitely gets the job done. Now with the 12 Pro Max, in some ways it was an upgrade from the 11 Pro Max, but in other ways it was a downgrade. I think the battery life on the 12 Pro Max was not as good as the 11 Pro Max when it first came out. Since then, it's kind of leveled out because of iOS updates and stuff like that. But with the 12 Pro Max, it's a perfect phone. It's more similar than not to, I think, a 13 Pro Max than, it being different. But I do think this is another solid phone that if you were to pick up today, you can pretty much move on with your life. You wouldn't have to worry about so many different updates and so many different things like that. Beautiful cameras, great build, tremendous build quality. Performance is, right up there with the 13 Pro Max. So I'm a huge fan of the, 12 Pro Max for sure. But when it comes down to it, as of right now, the iPhone 13 Pro Max is the perfect iPhone. It has everything going for it that all these other iPhones had, but it also combines it with a tremendous camera, with better performance than all these other iPhones, way better battery life, which is amazing. This iPhone has the best battery life from any of the iPhones I've ever tested in my life, which is great. It also has, I think, the biggest size battery from any iPhone out there. On top of that, when you have something like the 13 Pro Max that has the ProMotion display, this is one of the biggest differentiating factors between this iPhone and any other iPhone. These iPhones cannot get a software update to get a 120 Hz panel. And this iPhone has it built in. You have the ability to turn it off too if you want to, but I wouldn't turn it off. Keep it on because it is one of the coolest features of this specific iPhone. So when it comes down to it, I am a huge fan of the 13 Pro Max. I think it's one of the best iPhones ever made. And of course, I think the XS Max, 11 Pro Max, and 12 Pro Max are great iPhones. If you have the money, go for the 13 Pro Max. But if you have an 11 Pro Max or 12 Pro Max, I would recommend keeping it. The only iPhone I would even really recommend you to upgrade is a XS Max because the battery life isn't that great, and I don't think it's really that great of a phone anymore anyway. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.